Our next speaker, Jennifer Manchikanti, was born in Hyderabad and has over 16 years of experience in the corporate world across various spectrums, mainly based in Bangalore. She drives initiatives that focus on gender parity, cross-cultural and multi-directional teaming, and inclusive leadership. That itself is heavy, but she will explain to you in detail what it means. Let's put our hands and welcome Jennifer.
So these couple of pictures here sort of sum up my life right now, balancing life between my personal and professional priorities. That's our 5-year-old son who keeps us on our toes. I am on the road less traveled with a career in diversity and inclusion, which is not something you hear about every day, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what that's about. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about what I do through my story. I absolutely love my job. I love what I do right now. And so I'm really excited to be sharing a little bit about that with you. Speaking of the road, speaking of traveling, I'm going to start with a quick story and a disclaimer before that. This story has done its rounds on social media. So if you've heard it before, when I ask the question at the end of the story, please allow those who may not have heard it before the opportunity to respond before you do. So the story is told of a father and son who are on a road trip. They go away for a couple of weeks. They have an amazing father and son bonding time. The son's about 10 or 11. They're on the way back. Just about 15-20 minutes out from their home, the unthinkable happens. A truck swerves on the road and comes and hits their car head-on. It's horrific, the accident. There's just blood everywhere. Very shortly afterwards, the ambulance arrives and very quickly takes this father and son to the nearest hospital, the nearest big hospital that can treat trauma patients. About 5 minutes away from the hospital, unfortunately, the father succumbs to his injuries and he dies. But the son is still alive. The son is still alive. And so the paramedics in the ambulance are trying everything possible to make sure he stays alive. So they get to the hospital, they put him on a stretcher and take him into the emergency room. The surgeon who's on call comes, takes a look at the boy on the stretcher, takes a step back and says, "I cannot operate on this child. He is my son." The question is, who died in the ambulance and who's the surgeon now? Anyone want to take a guess? Yes? No? Okay, I've told this story in a lot of different forums, and it's interesting the kind of answers I get, okay? The usual responses are, well, the surgeon could be a stepfather, right? Or the biological father, or the adopted father. Sometimes it's even grandfather. I've even got responses like a ghost or God. God's always the right answer. The obvious answer is the surgeon's the mother. How many of you thought of that? A few hands. Great. I was at a business conference last year, and I told this story as part of my talk. And after the talk was over, I walked out, and a gentleman approached me, and he said, "I felt like kicking myself because I didn't make the association. I didn't think that, the mother was the surgeon." I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. A lot of people don't think about it straight away. It's okay." I was trying to make him feel better. And he said, "No, I felt like kicking myself because my wife's a surgeon." Now, I'm a woman. I have a corporate job. My son's pediatrician is a woman. Many surgeons I've met across the years are women. And even after watching countless hours of Grey's Anatomy, I remember being slightly confused when I first heard this story. This is something called gender bias. It's about how our brains process some information at the subconscious level, and we don't even realize that we're making decisions on a daily basis that stem from these biases. The thing is, the conversation for women at the workplace is larger than just bias. It's about this thing called gender parity, or the lack of it. And it's something that shows up across the globe. Women are paid less than men for the same job that they do. They get mentored and sponsored less than men. Their promotions and raises come at a slower rate. In fact, World Economic Forum tells us that it's going to take 100 years for us to achieve gender parity across the socio-economic fabric of our culture. If you look at the global labor force participation, it's 63% for women versus 94% for men from the ages of 25 to 55. A mere 6% of Fortune 500 company CEOs are women. World Bank ranks India at a shocking 120 out of 131 countries for female labor force participation. But there's a solution to all of this, and the solution is gender parity. Companies with 30% or more women in leadership positions are 15% more profitable. A McKinsey report says that if we focus on gender equality, we can add $12 trillion to global growth. And another report says that in the next few years, India's GDP can actually go up about 18% if more women participated and contributed to our economic growth. So the solution is there, it's gender parity. Part of what I do as a diversity and inclusion professional is to help women stay and grow in their careers. It's about strengthening our ecosystem and ensuring our ecosystem is set up in such a way that women thrive at the workplace. I remember, and most of us know this, that women drop out of the workforce at various points in their career, again, for various reasons. About 3 years ago, I had sent out an email to all of the employees in one of our new offices announcing that we had set up a creche facility within the office. This is a free of cost creche facility which is accessible for both men and women in the company alike. Within about 2 minutes, I get a call from an employee. She had just come back from maternity leave. She had had twins, and she was feeling really overwhelmed because she felt like she couldn't manage her work and life with twins. She had no additional support at home. The creche that we set up enabled her to bring her kids to the office, check on them during the day when they needed to be checked on, and focus on her work at the same time. 3 years later, she's still with our firm and very, very successful at what she does. But the journey to where I am today and what I do today started about 18 years ago. I know I look like a young millennial. I can probably pass off as someone in my 20s, but I'm not. 18 years ago, I went to a city called Bristol in the UK to take a gap year. I had worked for a couple of years already, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with my life, so I took a gap year. And I went there to work for a family center, which was in a sort of a rundown, high-crime part of Bristol. The center itself focused on programs for children and women in the community. And the women were mostly women who had dropped out of high school, so they didn't finish high school. A lot of them were mothers, and some of them were even single mothers. My role was to manage and create opportunities for these women to learn life skills. So we used to do things like teach them basic budgeting of their finances for the month, teach them nutrition, so it was a variety of things. And I remember the youngest of the mothers that I worked with was 13. She used to come to the center because she was getting bullied at school for obvious reasons. And with her tiny baby, she used to come and spend hours at this center. And I realized that this center had actually become a safe haven for a lot of the women there. It was a place where they learned skills, of course, but also it was a place where they could come and just be themselves and become a sort of a support system for each other. At the end of my gap year, I felt like this is what I could do for life. Just to be part of something, be involved in something that had such huge impact directly on women and subsequently their families, I wanted that. But I had no clue how to go about it. I came back to India, and I really wanted to pursue this dream as I thought it was, which in fact was God placing a passion in my heart. It was my calling, I just didn't know it at that point. I came back and life happened to me. I got married, I moved to a new city, and I inevitably joined the rat race. I felt a bit like Joseph, who had a dream, but the events that followed his dream were actually the pit and the prison. So the 10 years that followed after my gap year, I call it the great silence period, because it was during that time that I had absolutely no confirmation from God that this is what I was meant to be doing. I had no indication of living out my purpose. I honestly felt like I was in that pit for a little while. I had no clue where I was going. I thought about this dream for a long time. I thought about it several times, but I just didn't see how it would pan out. Towards the end of that 10-year period, I felt like I hit rock bottom. And I say this because at that point, I was in a very high-stress environment at work. How many of you have had to work with a difficult boss ever? Yeah, some of you. So you'll know that when you work with a difficult boss, your Monday morning blues last the entire week, right? Rolling out of bed on a Monday morning is easy, but getting off the floor is a whole nother story. I used to honestly sometimes wish for really drastic things like getting a call and saying, all systems are down, don't come into work today. Yeah? But it was a really high-stress environment. I had 2 managers in my team who couldn't see eye to eye on anything, and as a team, we were stuck in between, and they made our lives miserable. Again, going back to Joseph, probably when he was in the prison, he must have thought at some point, this is it. This is where I'm going to die. This is how it's going to end. This is going to be my story, right? But out of the blue, he gets pulled out and taken in to see Pharaoh. I was at work one evening, just doing my thing, trying to survive, and I get a phone call. The lady on the phone was asking me if I would be interested in a diversity and inclusion role. Now, I had no clue what that was. I'd never heard of it. And so I asked her to tell me a little bit about it. And while she was telling me about the job profile, I almost blurted out, especially the part that focused on advancing women at the workplace, I almost blurted out, are you telling me that I am actually going to get paid to do this? And that's how my D&I journey began. But it came at a cost. Accepting that offer wasn't easy. This actually wasn't my silver bullet. It came at a great cost, and my greatest cost was my 4-hour daily commute in taking up that job. Now, some of you have heard stories of the infamous Bangalore traffic. You've experienced it. You know a little bit, some of you know a little bit about Bangalore geography. And if you do, you probably know that Electronic City, where my office was, is quite likely easier to reach from Chennai than it is from East Bangalore, where we lived. And I remember for a couple of months I did this, but I began to get really frustrated. That 4-hour commute was really getting to me. And one evening, Silkport, I was stuck there. That's how the traffic looks like any time of day or night you go. In fact, I recently read a tweet. Someone said that apparently he went to drop his friend at the Bangalore airport. His friend had a flight to Dubai. His friend landed in Dubai. This man was still stuck at Silkport. That's Silkport for you. I was stuck in Silkport. My bus, the company bus that I was in, hadn't moved an inch in 30 minutes. Not a single inch. And I sent out a desperate text to Satish. I said, I can't do this anymore. His reply was almost immediate. He said, let's move to Electronic City. Yeah, right. I laughed it off, but a month later, that's exactly what we did. And I think by then I'd also begun to settle down a little bit in my role. I began to enjoy what I did, but it came again at a cost. because I had to go from a point of knowing nothing about diversity and inclusion to becoming a subject matter expert. I had to really work hard. I had to work twice as hard as anyone else in the team just to stay ahead. My learning curve was very, very steep, but I did it. I worked really hard. And I think, in fact, I remember even throughout my entire pregnancy, I was driving myself to work till one day before my son was born. I was determined to do well in this job. And I think slowly it started paying off. My hard work started paying off. I began to lead 2 global programs that focused on developing the pipeline of women leadership in the organization. I began to see my dream unfold a little bit. And I began to see the kind of impact these 2 programs were having, the conversations I was having with women, and the kind of initiatives that we put in place to help them stay and grow in their careers. That's really what I wanted to do, and I was doing it. But all through those 3 years of working for that organization, there's one thing I kept praying for. That was for us not to go through Silkport traffic every day. At that point, it was Satish who was doing the 4-hour commute. And so I prayed. I said, God, please bring down our commute. Please let it not be 4 hours a day. Let it be 1 hour a day. Or even 2. I'll settle for 2. But you know something about God? He's able to do immeasurably more than you can ask or even imagine. I got a job offer from EY, Ernst & Young. The role was everything I wanted. The scope of what I do right now, compared to what I was doing in the previous organization, is much larger. My impact, greater. And guess what my commute and Satish's commute is right now? It's 10 minutes for each of us. Yeah? And the other thing that I feel is immeasurably more than I could have asked for or imagined is the fact that I found a great mentor at EY. That's my boss, my supervisor right now. She's really empowered me to work with leaders in the organization to impact real change through policies, through processes, through programs, and through enablers. People often say that women don't often find great mentors and role models at the workplace, and I feel grateful that I found both in her. So that's a little bit about my journey. And if there's, I think, a couple of things that you could take away from my journey, I hope, rather, that it would be this. I don't know where you are in terms of your purpose, whether you feel like you have a dream or not. Maybe you don't have a dream right now, or maybe you have a dream, but you don't know how it's going to pan out. I want to tell you this. I honestly believe that God places in each of our hearts desires, passions that He wants us to pursue. So pursue that. Think about it. Think about what God's placed in your heart. And I think each of us is called to be part of something that's much bigger than ourselves. I don't know if you feel like you're in that pit a little bit. Maybe you feel like it's claustrophobic where you are. The walls are closing in. And you constantly tell yourself, if things were different, I would make an impact. If I was in a different job, in a different environment, with a different boss, with different traffic situations, things would be different. Then I'd make an impact. But I'd encourage you to stick it out. Whatever God's entrusted you with today, be faithful in that. Do things to your best. And God will honor that. So Jesus said, I've come to give you life and life abundantly. And I believe that applies to us even now in our situations right now. So stick it out if you feel like you're in that pit and pursue excellence in everything that you do. Or maybe you're already living out your dream. Maybe you're in a place of influence already. How are you walking the talk? Some of the language that we use as part of the diversity and inclusiveness team at EY is the fact that we want to build a culture where every employee feels like they're valued, they're able to contribute, they're able to be their best selves at work. It's a tall statement, it's a tall order, but that's what we aim for, and that's what we focus on. And for me, integrity has a lot to do with walking the talk. We've been thinking of expanding our team, and so when the process started, I interviewed a lot of people. I looked at several profiles and some really exceptional people. And I think I'd shortlisted a couple of people and sent the profiles to my manager. She looked at the profiles and she called me and she said, "Don't you think," and she said, "I looked at these profiles, these guys are great. Don't you think they'll get jobs anywhere?" Now, I didn't know where that conversation was going, but yeah, I agreed with her. She said, "And I feel like these guys will get great jobs given their skills and their experience." Again, I agreed with her. She said, "Why don't we, instead of looking at people who can get jobs anywhere, try and hire 2 people who are from really marginalized communities and bring them into a culture where they are able to contribute, where they feel valued, and with the commitment to set them up for success?" She said, "Why don't we hire 1 person with a disability and 1 transgender from marginalized communities?" To me, that's integrity, that's walking the talk. Again, I don't know where you are in your journey, but I want to encourage you, and I want to say this: only you can leave your legacy behind. You are unique in the gifts that you have, in the passions that you have, in the experiences that you have. Only you can leave your legacy behind. And I want to just leave you with this, to urge you, to encourage you, to press on and take hold of that for which Christ has taken a hold of you for. Thank you.
I would request Suresh and Kavita to please come up and felicitate our amazing speaker, Jennifer. And the memento says, "Margin Mover." And you have literally moved the margin this morning. Thank you very much.